What is up, everybody? It is a brand new episode of the Paul James Show, our preview episode for Round 4 2025. We are about to go head-to-head with the Dees in just a couple of days, and I apologise to anyone who missed the memo. It was 1 point in a whole lot of conversation pieces we discussed on Sunday night. We are live a day early than usual this week because I, as a full-time teacher, have parent-teacher interviews tomorrow night. Cannot be avoided. So we are going live on Wednesday night. That gives us a little bit of room to breathe before our Friday night match against the Dees. There's a whole lot we're going to get through from team selection, which hasn't occurred yet. So we'll spend a bit more time speculating as opposed to, I guess, basing some things on fact. We'll get into a match preview, talking about this matchup against the Dees. We'll talk about the other games of the week. We've got a player spotlight. We'll talk about some news, including the Q&A, which we'll then talk about my game of the week along the way. It is a very big week for football, and for me personally, it's a very big week for all things video games, my other big passion as well. We're going to be talking about that a little bit towards that Q&A section of the show. It's a particularly late night for me, so bear with me as I crack my first Coke of the night. I say first because it's going to be a long night. I could be having multiple. But we're going to get into a whole bunch of different things tonight. We are going to start with some Q&A, some team selection stuff. Of course, that hasn't occurred yet. So, our game against the Dees. Let me bring it up. We'll get our screen sharing systems up and running. And we'll make sure that, we make sure that I don't screw this up colossally, because I'm running ragged right now. We have, there we go. The Cats and the Dees going head-to-head this week. And when it decides it wants to open, 7:40 at GMHBA Stadium. We've got a day and 23 hours to go as of when we record this. The chat is already popping off with a few ideas. Firstly, hi, Mark. Great to have you on board tonight. Looking forward to chatting with you more as the show plays out. Amy, of course, Lever and Pickett are due to come back. Look, I don't think it's going to have a massive bearing on the result, to be honest. The D's are in a bit of a mess right now, but there is a bit of this that, like, there's a little bit that worries me. We'll talk more about that when we get to match preview. Let's talk about some selection stuff and what we could perhaps expect, because as we see, we go to team lineups and there's nothing of a sort just yet. It's kind of frustrating. We are 2 days out. That's not unusual to have team selection. If you were playing on a Sunday, and this was Thursday night, your teams would be announced. So we're kind of flying a little bit blindly here, which is unfortunate. It's been annoying, but again, my schedule is not really allowed for the greatest level of flexibility this week. I don't see, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the team selection from last week, our lineup from last week, and talk a little bit about who played, who didn't, and what changes we can perhaps expect for this matchup. So let's bring up our Brisbane game here. Sorry, I know not a fond memory for many of us, but let's talk about this Geelong Cats lineup and who could stay, who could go, what we should expect. I think there's some elements to the injury list that will play a part in this whole conversation as well. So I looked, and I'm going to go line by line. We'll kind of focus on the defensive unit, and we'll kind of work our way down the ground here. I don't see any changes to that core defense. Now, will everyone play in this position? Remains to be seen. But O'Sullivan, Henry, Blitzarves, no concerns with them remaining in the team. O'Connor, Zach Guthrie, O'Sheen Mullen will be interesting. Obviously, with Tom Stewart set to come back, seemingly. I think he's still listed as a test right now, but seemingly he's due to come back. And I think that certainly prompts a question. I think, as I mentioned in the review episode the other day, I think the game that O'Sheen Mullen put together against Brisbane was one of his best, if not the best that he's played for the Cats so far. But that said, what Tom Stewart can offer is still significantly greater at this point in O'Sheen's career. And so he's potentially on the verge of missing out in this particular case. Close, Dangerfield, Dempsey, I don't see there being any movement in that regard. Same with Smith, Myers, Stengel, Neil, Cameron, Oliver Henry, no issues there. Sam DeConing, Max Holmes, Tom Atkins, I don't see any concerns. So really, I think we've got question marks over O'Sheen Mullen and then the bench. And so our bench contains Lawson Humphreys, Jai Clark, Jack Bowes, and Ted Closey. Lawson Humphries, I think, is right as rain. He's in good form. He's performing really well. There's been no niggles that I'm aware of. Jack Bowes, I think if he hadn't have played as well as he did on the weekend, I'm not saying it was a 10 out of 10 game, but it was a greatly improved Jack Bowes over what we'd seen the week before. I think had it not been for that performance, he might have been in a bit of trouble, which then leaves us to talk about the same, I guess, three individuals we've been talking about all year when it comes to match selection and potential outs, being Oisin Mullen, Jai Clark, and Ted Closey. And my initial reaction when we spoke on Sunday night about this topic was, the idea that, okay, if Stewart comes back, let's assume that there's one, then I think it's Oisin Mullen. If there's two, there's a big question here. And I guess the question is, who's the other one? But beyond that, which of these two would potentially fall out? And I think the other day I was kind of leaning a bit more towards Ted Closey. Now I'll admit, I've got a bit of bias towards Jai Clark. I really like the kid and what he can offer, but his body's still developing, and that has left him a bit vulnerable on occasions. He's much smaller than some of the others. His intensity is huge. His tackle pressure, fantastic, but he is a smaller body that's still developing. And so that certainly, I guess, makes him a riskier prospect from time to time. And so I thought Closey would be the one to fall out. I think I've changed my tone a little bit here. I think if there's another player to come out, it might be Closey. Now, that would be, of course, unfortunate. This doesn't factor in the sub as well, but that was Mitch Nevitt. So I guess he could potentially be in that list as well. I'm going to say that it's perhaps Jai Clark in this case that actually that misses out, just because of that body size. And we're going against a Melbourne midfield who is big-bodied, mature, ready to go. And I think a lot of them could bash their way through Jai Clark. At this particular point in his development, I don't see a Petrarca and Oliver Avani having any concerns getting through him. He'll get in the way, and I think he'll throw his all at it. But I think he could be pushed through. So I think whereas Ted Closey's just got that extra fire, like that little bit of extra size, and he's got that same sort of fire in the belly, I think Ted Closey's pretty safe in this particular case. And Ben just kind of chimes in, half cocked because he's clearly not listening properly. Ted Closey's safe in my opinion, as is Mitch Nevitt. I think he's got that similar sort of thing as Ted Closey. He's got that bigger body. He's physically taller as well. He's got that size and a bit more development under his belt. And I think that holds him in good stead. But then the question is, who comes in? And the name that keeps coming to mind, and partially because we're having some problems in this department, but also partially due to kicking 2 goals and having 39 hitouts on the weekend, is Rhys Stanley. He's finding some pretty good form in the seconds, and he's that mature body. He's got a good history against Max Gawn. I can't help but wonder if Max Gawn might be the inclusion in this particular case, if he's the one that comes in and costs one of the smalls here. We go a little bit taller through the midfield there. Brisbane. Melbourne are tall in all of those key position roles. They've got your Van Royens up deep forward. You've got Gawn in the ruck. You've got May and Lever in those key defensive posts. Like they've got the height there, and the ruck we've kind of been a bit vulnerable in. We are a bit smaller when it comes to defenders, in terms of like our key defenders not being of the same sort of height as many others in the competition. It's been a bit of a vulnerability. And when Melbourne can stretch us in that height department, I wonder if bringing in a Stanley, who's in good form, who's got good history against Gawn, and then can unlock Sam De Koning to go back to his traditional key defensive post and do the job there. Mark Blitzarves to play in that sort of role, or set him free across the wing or through the midfield. I wonder if that versatility is going to be really, really important in this particular matchup. So I've just got a little funny feeling with him being right there on the edge anyway, that maybe Rhys is due for a return. And if he comes back and delivers, he could stick around for a while. Rhys Stanley has long been the momentum sort of player. He's a confidence player. And if his body's feeling good and he's doing well in the seconds, he's getting, he's kicked a couple goals from the ruck, that bodes well. If he can come back, bottle that, come back and repeat it. I think that's all good news. Jackie asks in the chat, has there been any news on Shannon Neal? Obviously, we discussed it on the show on Sunday. It was apparently spoken about on SEN, if I recall, that he was in a moon boot. I haven't seen or heard any reports. It sounds like, if there'd been something substantial or anything of concern, really, I would imagine that would have been then discussed in the news. So they've gone precautious. They've done a scan. I presume nothing has come from it. And he did play out the game. Not well, but none of our key position players played overly well on the week. Sorry, especially in the forward half of the ground, played especially well on the weekend. So I think he might be okay. He's listed. Oh, apparently he's listed as a test, and I think again that's probably precautionary. But we'll see. We'll see. All right, let's continue to move through this. We've obviously discussed potential ins, outs, the bench, emergencies. I don't see there being any great change there. Obviously, we don't have that detail yet, but I'd imagine all of those players that I've suggested being out, O'Shea Mullen, Jai Clark, and then another, will make up that emergency section. I don't expect there to be anything too wild. Maybe a Mitch Duncan could be close. Jackie suggests a test could then result in 4 weeks. The way Geelong does its business, it's quite possible. But yeah, we'll see in that regard. I could see a Mitch Duncan, like he's got to be close, and that experienced head, that wily experienced head, he's always going to be right there on the edge. And I think the club at different stages is going to want to make sure that they give him opportunities, keep him fresh, keep him forming at that top level, keep him motivated, and of course, get close to hitting that 300-game milestone. They want him to get that. I have no doubt about it. We're a club who, as much as we are there for the team success, we do like celebrating the individuals and all they've accomplished and all that they've contributed to the club. Mitch Duncan fits that bill perfectly, and I hope that we do get him to game 300. Whether he gets another game notched on the belt this week remains to be seen. All right, milestones, there's none projected, so we'll move on from that. Notable absentees, we'll have to wait and see. We don't have any big question marks when it comes to injuries, but now that takes us to the injuries and suspensions list, where Tom Stewart is still listed as a test for his knee, but Chris Scott has all but confirmed that he will be back in this week. Shannon Neal with his ankle is listed as a test. I think we'll be okay, but that does potentially unlock scenarios for Reece Stanley if he comes out. Jake Cole-Jasny listed as 1 to 2 weeks for his groin, getting closer. Jed Buse, 5 to 9 weeks. Jack Martin with the calf is now listed as to be confirmed. There's something has clearly occurred in that space because he got some game time. He was getting there. But for whatever reason, he seems to have hit a bump in the road there, and he's kind of slipped a little bit in his development. Jake Taylor from Twitter tonight says they'll drag Duncan to 300. Should have retired last year. Look, I'm all for if. So I mean, I've been an unabashed Mitch Duncan lover for quite some time. And I think he's been harshly treated by Geelong fans over the years. Now he is slowing down. I know people are going to be, I think a great highlight of that obviously is that play right near the end of the game where he got chased down in the prelim final. Not ideal. But I think he's still got enough that he can contribute. He's never been a speedster. What he has been able to do so well has been deliver the ball. And the problems that Mitch Duncan has faced over the years, in my opinion, have always stemmed from a scenario where he has been out for a couple of weeks with an injury, and then because his greatest weapon is that accuracy, is that kick, it's taken him a few weeks to get into it, and then there's been an issue since. There's an interesting comment from Jackie that I'm going to pin because we'll get back to that one in a second. But yeah, if he's able to continue to play in the VFL and get that form up, it means that when they do flick a switch and bring him in for whatever reason, whether it's injuries, whether they are trying to get into game 300, whether he is, justifies his spot in the 23, whatever the reasoning is, I think he'll be a great asset to us because he'll be coming in with some runs on the board, with some touch. He'll be kicking the ball like we know he can do so well. And I look forward to the idea of Mitch Duncan delivering into the forwards. If you look back at some of these biggest milestones that Tom Hawkins and Jeremy Cameron have achieved as Cats, you will often see Mitch Duncan has had a lot to do with that score involvement, whether it's delivering it directly to them and getting the goal assist or being directly involved in a play where he's laced someone out. He's managed to claim hands on the ball and been a really important link in that chain. I love what he's done over the years. Yes, there is a question mark as to whether this year could have or should have been the last. I do think he's on the list so that he can get to game 300. But I think there's still plenty that he can provide if he's required over the course of the year. Let's talk about Jackie's point here. Chris Scott all but said it. I'd love for a little bit of extra clarification there. Like, did he say that in his press conference for the week? I haven't caught that one yet. But of course, Sean Manor has been performing quite well in the VFL too. He was best on ground on the weekend in the eyes of a lot of people for the VFL team. And so I think he could be really close to him. Maybe there's another out. talking further about Mitch Duncan is, I think Amy I think highlights what I was talking about too with Mitch Duncan and his kicks. You did notice a bit of a drop off. I genuinely think so much of that is because that inconsistency has been there because of injuries. That's then led to that lack of touch that you get from being consistently out on the ground. And that greatest weapon that he's got is blunted somewhat. If Shannon Neal is out and Stanley comes in with Tom Stewart, could that put Tom back in the middle and Pat down forward? I think that's a distinct possibility as well. There's a lot of, and I spoke about this actually in our review of the Geelong Brisbane game. I'm concerned by the lack of flipping of the magnets that goes on at Geelong. When a team gets on a bit of a run, it seems like we are too keen to persist with the current plan, whatever strategy A was, whatever plan A was. We stick to that for far too long. We get 4 or 5 goals kicked against us. The game is completely flipped on its head, and we can't course correct until quarter. I just saw Brendan until the end of the quarter before we can kind of try and rectify that. And sometimes it's too late, as we saw in the game against Brisbane. So I like the idea that Tom Stewart comes in, that Danger goes forward, but then if need be, Stewart goes back, Danger goes back in the midfield. You can kind of flip these magnets around. We've got to be more flexible. We've got to be more willing to flick the switch and make some moves sooner. And having a Tom Stewart back capable of going into defense and into the forward line with or without the Shannon Neal situation, I think is really, really important to us. So keen on that one. Let's jump to Brendan's comment there. We all know who the Cats need to call up. Say his name and he will appear. Of course, that's Joel Selwood. No, I know you're talking about Mitch, but that's it. Enough of that. But the chat loves it. Every time we can talk about our dearly departed Mitch, Brendan will take that opportunity. All right. We've kind of segued a little bit into the match preview portion of the show here. So let's continue that. As I mentioned, GMHBA 7:40 on Friday. The Cats currently sit 9th with a ledger of 1 win, 2 losses. The Dees are winless to this point, 17th on the ladder, and they are 0-3 and 1 out of their last 10. Is that 1 out of 10, including last season? Oh, yeah, 1 from their last 10, inclusive of last season. So they're not coming in good form whatsoever. They've been pantsed a few times this year. That hiding to Gold Coast was pretty ugly on the weekend. There we go. We're, of course, talking about George Stevens, who should be kicking the door down. I would love to see George Stevens' name appear on the emergencies list. He is in white-hot form at the moment and really showing the faith a lot of us had put on him when he was first selected by the Cats to be on the money. Let's talk about the history between Geelong and Melbourne. The last time we played, Melbourne got the Chocolates by 8 points at the MCG. In our last 6 games, though, we've won 5 out of 6 against Melbourne at GMHBA Stadium. We have the wood on them there. But if we want to, it's not relevant. We're not playing in a final now. But, of course, recent finals history is that ugly 2021 prelim final at Optus Stadium. We can put a big star next to it because COVID years don't count. Do they, Richmond? And Ben's also just wanted to make sure we shout out the Clayton Oliver trip to the farm in the off-season last year, which didn't eventuate in a trade to Geelong, but of course is a nice... Why would I think of Mitch Hardy? I don't know. Why would I think of Mitch Hardy? No idea, Brendan. Of course, there's the Clayton Oliver trip to the farm, and it didn't quite result in him making the trip down the highway, but there's probably a seed of something in his mind. I think if this season doesn't go well for the Dees, we could be talking about this topic again in a few months from now. That'll be really interesting. What's at stake for this game? For me, and I think it is really, really clear for all of us, we've spoken a lot on the show over the course of the year so far, and I'm going to bring up the Geelong fixture in a moment so that we can really highlight this point that I've been banging on about quite a lot on the show, and I'm going to do so once more. We're going to talk about this fixture and kind of, I guess, the importance of starting strong. Now, we haven't done so. We obviously smashed the Dockers, but then we've lost our next 2 in close fashion. Great. It's not done devastating damage to our percentage at all, but we don't want to be losing those. Set this all aside and we go, okay, Melbourne, we should win. But then it's Adelaide, in Adelaide for Gather Round. It's Hawthorn for Easter Monday. It's Carlton, who based on their current form, we should win, but it may not take long for them to flick the switch. The Pies, who are going well, the Giants, the Power, who could get back up and about, the Dogs, who are always there and thereabouts. Like there is, out of this first 9, and we've taken an extra loss than I would have thought, but as far as I'm concerned, there were 2 gimmies in this entire first batch of games, and yet we're 1 and 2 from 3 games. We've already blown one of them, being the St Kilda game. So, yeah, it's pretty important that we get as many runs on the board as we can. We could be talking about season over very, very quickly, simply due to just how difficult this initial run is. And if we just aren't, firing like we need to, we could really put a line through ourselves pretty early, which would be a real shame, because I think, there's still plenty of reasons, despite some unfortunate scenarios in the last few games, there's plenty of reason to believe that we could still be a premiership winning team. But we could rule ourselves out with some less than stellar performances over the course of the next few weeks. So yeah, for me, I think it's really, really important that we try and that we bank the win here in this case. We need to take every opportunity against weaker opponents or vulnerable opponents to make sure that we're in a really competitive spot later in the year. Let's take a look at some of the comments here. Mrs. Nobles. Are the Demons treating this game as an interstate match and spending the night at Geelong in Geelong this year? I don't know. I haven't heard any rumblings about that. But given some of the dramas that they're having right now, I wouldn't blame them. I think it's maybe a good thing. It's just get your head out, get out of the Melbourne bubble, go down the highway, go to the beaches in the morning, freshen up, all those sorts of things. In terms of a mental thing, it's probably not a bad idea. I don't know if they're doing it though. Amy says, if this does end up being the end of the season or season over, it's not the end of the world. Can get a decent draft pick to use on there's probably another comment there, but on a father-son or an academy pick. We're hearing lots of talk at the moment about some pretty awesome academy prospects coming through the Geelong area as well. And then, of course, the likes of Jagger Mooney in the mix as well on the father-son side. We might need to play with some picks this year, especially if we're trying to still also get a big external external recruit from another team. So let's continue on. We've got some Mozzies hanging around. I didn't think it was going to be warm enough for that today, but they're here. So let me kind of I'm going to low-key try and air guard myself a little bit whilst we do the show and get some of my protective stuff going. So let's continue on in that regard. So game breakers for me. I think for me it's relatively simple. So obviously Melbourne's one wood. Their big advantage is the midfield, from Gawn to Viney to Petrarca to Oliver, and then obviously a number of others that cycle through there as well. We need to, and it's the same conversation I've had every week, we need to at least break even with that. And so for me, I think the biggest player in this mix is Max Holmes, who has had a solid start to the season, but not a world stopper. He's not, he's the player that we're all expecting to potentially push for All Australian at the end of the season. And he hasn't started like that sort of player just yet. He's not been poor by any stretch, but he's not been what we expect him and probably what we need him to be, considering some of the form of some of the other players on our list so far this year. So for me, I think he's the big one. If he can explode, utilize that speed, that power that he's got through the contest, inside and outside, that's going to take us a long way towards winning this game, because then I guess he's the game breaker. The key to victory side of it is our forwards, our 2 key forwards, and specifically for me, Jeremy Cameron, who has been wildly out of sorts so far this season. I spoke about this in the review. He kicked 4 in the first game. 3 of those were in junk time against Freo, where it really didn't count for much. I'm interested to see that. Maybe I'm wondering because I feel like he was really, really high late in the season. I'm wondering if Max Holmes has perhaps technically slipped from like 2nd or 3rd to 5th, like he's maybe sliding a little bit. I don't know. That'd be a really interesting one to see. I guess if we could narrow that down to the 3 games so far, it's maybe not enough of a sample size for them to get that data or to accurately generate that data. But for me, with Stephen May and Jake Lever there in the key defensive posts, it's so important that Jeremy Cameron, for me, has a really big game, and I don't want to see him running up the ground. I do like the idea. Oh, this was from Champion Data. I really do like the idea that was floated by someone in the chat on Sunday night that perhaps we send him deep forward, get him to play out of the goal square, make sure he's in a constantly attacking position. If the ball doesn't make its way up there at times, so be it. Stretch the field, make Melbourne accountable. Jake Lever, who would be the likely one to play on him, I would have thought, cannot go roaming up the ground if you're going to leave Jeremy Cameron in the forward line, because if you do, you're toast. As soon as Geelong gets the ball out of there and dumps it in the 50, it's over. So that stretches the ground. That keeps Lever accountable. Shannon Neal can get up the ground, and that makes Stephen May accountable. You get danger in that mix. Some other tools floating in. If you've got our ruck situation that I'm speculating about, you can have DeConing float in there. You can have Blitzars float in there. Force those Ds to have to defend properly, and that causes a lot of problems. So for me, Max Holmes is our game breaker. If he fires, we win. Jeremy Cameron, the key to victory. My final prediction for this game is the Cats get the job done to the tune of 32 points. The other interesting thing about the day, if you happen to not be working on Friday, which I am that close to, I finish work for the term on Friday, so I won't be able to get over there. But Geelong and Casey. So Geelong currently sitting first in the VFL, Casey Demons sitting fifth. They are the curtain raiser at GMHBA Stadium from 3:50. Let's hope the weather is not too bad, because the last curtain raiser at GMHBA that I remember was the Geelong and the Bulldogs one. They chopped that ground to bits, and then it was pretty ugly from that point on later that night. It really didn't help the Geelong case that game against that night against the Dogs. What are we talking about? The weather in Geelong is 18 degrees. No signs of rain from the look of it. So we might be okay. Chance of precipitation is 0%. Good news, everybody. Working is overrated, you're right. But in the business I'm in, I have to pull out a medical certificate to get a day off on the last day of term. So it's kind of hard. I'm also looking forward to having 2 weeks where I won't be working. All right, Cats by 32 points. GMHBA hosting both that game and the curtain raise between Geelong and Casey Demons at 3:50. The rest of the week, let me bring back the fixture. We'll reset it, get it back in the format that we want. The rest of the round, a really fascinating one tomorrow night, and teams have been announced for the Pies and the Blues. The Blues are 0-3. The Pies are in pretty good form right now. Jackie, they don't need teaching. It's the last day of term. They're all taking the piss at this point anyway. Pies and the Blues go head-to-head. And this is a really fascinating one. Interesting thing to note, back when Geelong won the flag in 2022, we had the oldest on-field team of all time that day. The average age was 28 years and 202 days, 200 and less than 10 days. The Pies going into this week with the various changes they've made are going to now be the oldest recorded team stepping out foot on the field of all time, with about an extra 70 days on average older than those Cats of 2022. They're going head-to-head with the Blues, who need a win desperately right now. Of course, we've spoken about Geelong and the Dees and that matchup. The Suns go head-to-head with the Crows, and this is a really fascinating game. For me, I rate the Suns so highly. The Crows, though, white-hot form starting the season really, really strongly. The game is on the Gold Coast. That gives the Suns a bit of an advantage. Keen to see how that one plays out. This is a big moment for both teams, who are trying to make a big statement and say they are here. Missing the end-of-term work function to head down to the game. Oh, you're a teacher as well, Mrs. Noballs. This is... Between Mrs. No Balls and Bussy Sniffer, we've got some crazy names in the chat here. But I'm glad you're skipping out on that. For me, the commute is then too big. I still wouldn't make it regardless. The Tigers and the Lions. If the Tigers are even remotely competitive, it'll be a surprise here. The Lions are just building into that season nicely and have managed to do so without dropping a game to this point. North and the Swans, you'd think the Swans can take this opportunity to start getting ahead a little bit, but North have started strongly, and Larkey has 12 goals from his first 3 games so far. He is the Coleman medal leader and is looking really, really great for North so far. On Sunday, we have the Giants going head-to-head with the Eagles. They'll get the job done there, and everyone will flip Harley Reid off. Port will play the Saints in an intriguing match, I would say. The Saints, performing relatively well to this point in the season, obviously with the win against us. Port, we're still unsure. I mean, they're on paper, they're a high-quality team. They're not playing like one. Let's see how that works out. And Ollie Lord will continue to not get games and feel the pull more and more to come to Geelong, won't he? Our final game of the round is the Dockers and the Bulldogs. Dockers should get it done at home, you'd think, but you can't rule it out. The Dogs have got this strange old quality about them to perform even when they perhaps shouldn't. And the Hawks and the Bombers have the bye. Poor Bombers well and truly out of sync now, having missed opening round, now copped a bye, and they don't get to fix that ledger up until round 23. The Hawks, it's just nice to see them not winning, right? Just sick of hearing about them winning. But they'll obviously have to then rebound for gather round and then a match up against the Cats. That is our topic 3, our other games of the week. And before we proceed any further in the show, we're going to get to the player spotlight next. We're going to do some Q&A and talk about a whole host of things that you want to discuss in the chat. We are going to first take a word from our sponsor.
The Hoops Crew Media Network is proudly sponsored by Cyril Cook Florist. Visit them at shop 1211 Leather Street in Breakwater. Phone them on 035 222 2244 or visit their website at www.cyrilcookflorist.com.au and use the offer code GOCATS in the voucher field at checkout to get 20% off your next online purchase.
Thank you, Cyril Cook Florist, as always, for all that you do in your ongoing support of the Hoops Crew. Now, let's get back into the show here, where it's player spotlight time, and we're going to talk about Sam De Koning, who, very excitingly, has just signed on for 2 more years with the Cats. That will take him through to free agency, I believe. So we'll see what that results in a couple of years from now. I know there's been, temptations from other clubs. Gold Coast are in conversation with him. The Saints are in conversation with him. There's certainly reasons to potentially head elsewhere. He might engage in those conversations in 2 years, but we've got him for another 2 years. He can continue to develop as a ruck, to develop as a defender. Really interested to see where he plays his football, but at least for the next 2 years, he's playing it in Geelong. He's originally from the Dandenong Stingrays. His dad, Terry, played 31 games for Footscray in the 1980s. His brother, Tom, is one of the AFL's best players right now. He has started so well for the Blues. Right now, in my mind, he is clearly the front... Well, not clearly, because Tristan Sherry's doing a pretty good job as well, but he is the front runner for the All-Australian Ruckman as far as I'm concerned right now. Sam probably exploded first, but Tom has then kind of surged past him more recently. Sam was picked 19 in the 2019 draft. That worked out very well for us. He was second in the Rising Star that year and came awfully close to pinching it as far as I'm concerned. He debuted in round 5, 2021 against North Melbourne. And at this point, 24 years old. He's played 65 games, kicked 5 goals. He's first in that 2022 grand final. He was a Rising Star nominee in round 11, 2022 with 19 disposals and 9 marks. As we've got in the notes here, 2022 Premiership player where he kicked his first ever AFL goal. And it's been one of the big questions, and I think why we're only talking about 2-year deals for him is that on his side, he wasn't selected for our 2024 finals campaign. And of course, there'd been some injury concerns leading up to that. But, form had been a bit of a challenge for Sam prior to that as well. And so I think there was a bit of a combination of reasons that ultimately led to him missing out on a spot in our finals campaign for 2024 and a perhaps slightly disgruntled feeling from him as well. All right. Let's talk about some news. And there's some Geelong news. There's some broader AFL news that we'll all discuss. There's some key stats that relate to Geelong as well that we're going to take a moment to celebrate also. AFL fans, they're whinging. Of course they are. They're whinging about Geelong. They're whinging about Geelong and our late outs. And those people can jam it so far up their ass that it comes out their mouth. I'm sick of people whinging about the Cats about petty nothing things. Chris Scott said it very well himself in the pregame, and he's discussed it again since. Tom Stewart, we picked to play and we thought was going to play. You wouldn't have put him on a plane and wasted him and his family's time if you didn't think there was a good chance of him playing. It didn't work out. We didn't select him, but everyone else can, again, jam it. This week, and there's a few different events that are going to be on in the pre-game. This week, Geelong is celebrating its 100-year anniversary of its sponsorship with Ford. There is no sponsorship with any club that has lasted as long as the one that Geelong has with Ford. And there's a bunch of pre-game events. I was listening to the final bell earlier today, and there's going to be a world record attempt making a giant Ford logo out of the people. How novel. At about 5:30 on Friday night. And then there's going to be some other functions and some retired legends coming out to celebrate the occasion at about 7 o'clock on game day as well. So if you're going to the game, get in early, be part of a world record attempt, and then make sure you're in the stadium by 7 o'clock so that you can see everything else that goes on. I think there's a few names they're withholding, but I saw Chappie was going to be there, Joel Selwood's going to be there, and a range of others. I think Mel Hickey was coming along. It's fantastic to see. Jack Henry is leading the AFL for marks so far this season with 28, while Tom Atkins leads the AFL for tackles with 37. Tom Atkins, I got clipped by a few people in the chat the other day. It was a stat that I hadn't looked at, and I should have looked at it when it comes to Tom Atkins because it's one of his, I think, greatest KPIs is the tackle count for him. I totally underestimated where he was at when it. Why can't it be Lexus? Lucas says because the Pies locked them up. Eddie locked them up. Oh, Dan is in the comments. Geelong is somehow responsible for Oscar McInerney being a late withdrawal as well. Of course we are. Of course we are. Also, I think Andrew Dillon stubbed his toe at one point, and that's Geelong's fault too. He got really angry that we continued to be successful, kicked the desk, and that's our fault. That's how the story goes, I believe. So, where was I? Yes, Tom Atkins, 37 tackles, leading the competition. That's a fantastic figure. Obviously, more than 10 a game at this point. In fact, more than 12 a game at this point. He's absolutely starting on fire in that regard. Tom Atkins, I apologize. I forgot the stat that is most important to you. You're killing it, as are you, Jack Henry, with those 28 marks for the season so far. Nearly averaging 10 a match is awesome. Geelong's time in possession. Geelong are 23-0 since the start. This is an awesome stat that Ben's pulled here. Geelong are 23-0 since the start of 2023 when they keep their opponent under the AFL average of 41%. When the opponent has it above the average, Geelong are 2-19. We've just got to get our hands on the ball. This goes back to the same conversation we've had off the back of the Brisbane, Fremantle, and St Kilda games. When Geelong has its hands on the ball, they win because they are clean with it. They've got this dangerous forward line. Our defensive unit is rock solid. When we get smashed at the coalface, like we have a propensity to do at different stages of games, if not the whole game sometimes, we're in all sorts. 2-19 is the stat. Ben, that is... I don't like pumping Ben Reeve up too often. Goes to his head. He's got a shocking ego. Anyone who's met him in person, it's awful. That's an awesome stat to pull. 23-0 since the start of 2023. Keep in mind 2023's form. Oh. Did he pull it from Champion? Well, either way, he went and sourced it for me, and that's awesome. I love that he's grabbed that stat for me. Nathan Kruger has been selected in the VFL state squad to play the Sandful team. Former Cat. Where is he? Let's quickly scroll back and celebrate Brendan, Mitch Hardy, because former Cat Mitch Hardy was also named in that VFL state squad. That's awesome to hear. Won't be playing for the AFL team anytime soon, but awesome to hear. And obviously awesome. Oh, these Mozzies. Number one. Nobody makes me bleed my own blood. All right, let me scroll back to the comments there. Okay, this is. I'm going to save this topic till the end, actually, because this is one that I really want to share some thoughts on. I've been waxing a little bit about the topic with people at work today, so we'll save the conversation about the AFL fixture till the end of the news section here before we jump into Q&A. Noah Bolter has been cleared to play in round 5 ahead of sentencing in his assault case. We, of course, spoke about that assault case on New Year's Eve. We had a video there talking all about it. And we've, of course, since seen the video of what he's done. It's atrocious. Personally, I'm shocked that he copped the 4-week ban, or maybe the footage wasn't available to the AFL at the time. So, okay, maybe at the time the 4 weeks was considered reasonable based on the information they had. But since then, we've now seen that video. As far as I'm concerned, he should be out of football until the case has been answered and he either receives prison time or whatever punishment is deemed fit. He should just be struck from the game until that point. And that is what I believe occurs in the NRL, and I think there's other sports that adhere to a similar sort of policy. I firmly believe in innocent till proven guilty. The footage is pretty damning. But I also believe that it's just like in cases like this where you got high profile people, keep them out of the spotlight. They're going to get booed. They're going to get harassed. They're going to get questioned by me. Like, they're not going to get left alone. Just step away. Don't get celebrated for what you've done. Just keep your head down. Do what you've got to do. And then if it turns out you're guilty, cop it. If you're not guilty, return to football. No worries. But anyway, I don't think it's the right decision if he plays. We'll see what happens when team selection comes out for round 5. We've got some West Coast news. Stay tuned for Nuff of the Week that will go live on the weekend. I have already recorded it. I am so sure that the conversation about Oscar Allen is going to be my Nuff of the Week thing. It's pissed me off so much that will be my topic for Nuff of the Week this week. So stay tuned for that. The most recent Nuff of the Week, you've had the opportunity to see it on the live show. It's been the commentary around the boundary umpire judgments of the on-field, I'd say, umpire judgments of deliberate out of bounds. That was that topic. That's been live for everyone to check out on the YouTube channel today as well, for anyone who wasn't watching the Paul James show live the other night. But my next one will be about Oscar Allen meeting up with Sam Mitchell. Ridiculous stuff, but I'm going to save my full vent for Sunday night. I mentioned before, Collingwood is set to be the oldest team in history, with the team that is selected this this Thursday night's match. Nathan Cracker has passed away, which is really sad news. We've had far too many players in that 40-ish year old window who have all passed away lately. And you don't wish that on anyone, but it's really sad that we're losing players of this sort of age that have got so much life ahead of them, you would imagine, and they're gone. So condolences to Nathan Cracker's family. Hopefully everyone is back up on their feet and in good spirits soon. He did kick 3 goals in a losing 2011 grand final against the Cats. Shoving players into contests is going to be one of those hot topics coming up. We've obviously seen a really big decision made at the match review at the tribunal involving Mansell from Richmond. I nearly said Nigel Mansell, the old F1 racer. Not him. Definitely not him. But he's copped, I think it's 3 weeks in the end. Deservedly so, as far as I'm concerned. It's dangerous play, and I think it needs to be stamped from the game very, very quickly. The way that players are being pushed into contests and put at all sorts of jeopardy as a result. Victorian clubs, and I haven't heard Geelong's name linked in to this one, so no video from me coming anytime soon, unless someone can justify a reason why there's a pitch. How can I pitch the idea of Zach Butters joining the Cats? I don't know as of yet. Someone throw ideas at me and we'll see what we can do. But there's a few Victorian clubs circling him: Richmond, Collingwood, Essendon, and Hawthorn, all targeting Zach Butters at the moment. So we'll see how that one plays out. He's technically got a year to go on his contract, but the prevailing theory coming out of Adelaide is that with Kenny Hinkley departing and his relationship with Ken being really, really strong, that he might actually leave at the end of 2025 as well and not spend any time with Josh Carr as head coach, I suppose. The AFL is also set to add a chief operating officer to its executive team. Ben has speculated Tom Harley. No idea. at this point. Tom has done obviously amazing things for the Sydney Football Club. I'd be really, really interested to see what comes of this whole thing. But I've got no insights whatsoever on that particular topic. Geelong would want Butters. Kenny coming to Geelong. I mean, sorry, everyone would want Butters. Yeah, he's not. You don't pass that opportunity up. Maybe that's all the justification I need. Is like, why wouldn't we want Zach Butters? Why aren't we in this conversation? Let's get in this conversation. Did Kel Toomey? Okay, so Kel Toomey mentioned Geelong and the Bulldogs today on Gettable. Fantastic. You, Jackie, Amy, you're absolute rock stars. You've given me all the reasoning I need to put together a video. Stay tuned for one in the next week or so. Inside of the next week or so. Let's go back to this conversation about the AFL fixture. So we're going to stop sharing our screen. We're going to go down here. We're going to share our screen and we're going to bring up SEN here, who've posted an article outlining some of the thinking. And Eddie Maguire revealed a lot of this on Footy Classified the other night, where he spoke about the AFL's plans across the next 2 years to kind of rework the AFL season, in part to account for things like the Grand Prix and the 150 years of cricket celebration that's going to be going on between Australia and England that would clash with the normal AFL fixture as well. There's a range of different events, the NFL, of course, as well. There's a range of different events coming to Melbourne and different parts of Australia that are going to wreak a bit of havoc with the MCG fixturing for the AFL. They're, I guess, trying to get on the front foot and be a little bit creative here to try and come up with a better solution or a different solution. So let's go through it. AFL power brokers are considering radical changes to the fixture, which would see the grand final move from its traditional end of September date in a bid to avoid conflict with the future Australian Grand Prix and to accommodate the NFL and NFL fixture and cricket test match at the MCG in September 2026 and March 2027, respectively. The highest echelons of the AFL are seriously discussing a bombshell shakeup. If approved, the grand final would be played in the second week of October in 2026 and 2027. The plans would also see the season open with 2 weekends of State of Origin football and ensure a blockbuster final series with no conflicts with rival codes. This is not an April Fool's Day joke. This is being discussed at the highest echelons of the AFL, Ed Maguire said on Footy Classified. That is to move the grand final in 26 and 27 to the second week of October, and the season would start with the State of Origin played over 2 weekends. The grand final move would stop clashes with the Grand Prix at the start of the year. The NFL game for points would fit nicely into the bye weekend between the end of the season and the finals, and then the following year, the 150th anniversary test match between Australia and England. Most importantly, it gives players and fans a better start to the season. It also means no clashes with rival codes for the 3 biggest games, the 2 prelims and the final. It would also be a daylight savings grand final in 2026, which could lead to a night grand final. The AFL is working with the theme of turning major events into mega events to set up major growth in the game over the next decade. The AFL needs to be seen... this is now a bit of editorial here. I don't mind the idea. I heard that, also another part of this whole conversation is Indigenous All-Stars game. Oh, there it is. Sorry, actually, I just found it. I'd like to see that the Division 1... So who's talking about this? Who said this? I don't even know who we're talking about now. Anyway, I'd like to see that Division 1 be Indigenous All-Stars, Victoria, South Australia. I think this is Eddie Maguire saying this on Channel 9. I think it's kind of the issue. So Indigenous All-Stars, Victoria, South Australia and Western Australia, and then Northern Territory, New South Wales, Tasmania and Queensland. Maybe do it over 2 weekends. I don't mind the thinking. I think there's a little bit that still needs to be reworked. I think there's a bit of reworking going on, but they've got time. So we'll see how all that plays out. But it's a really fascinating scenario. I don't mind the idea of a later start to the season. I think it does away to a degree, or possibly not. Can't rule it out, of course. I don't want to get into a long rant about climate change and all those sorts of things, but and global warming, etc., etc. But of course, we've started the game with some scorches from Geelong and Fremantle to Geelong and Brisbane. We've seen some really awful weather. And sorry, I guess there was also, which game was it? There was another one that was really, really hot. Can't remember what teams were involved. It'll be up north or in the west. But there's been some really inclement weather so far. If you start the season a few weeks later, you avoid some of that. Maybe not all of it, but you avoid some of that. And that does open the night finals sort of idea. There's a whole range of positives that could potentially stem from this. I'm really interested. Let's take a look at the chat here where we've got a couple other points of conversation that are being discussed. Let's go back to, where are we? Amy here talks about Geelong being into Butters in his draft year, but Port had a pick instead. I think it was the same year as Jordan Clark. That worked out well for us, I suppose. We loved Jordan Clark until he left. I'd be shocked if Tom Harley moved back to Victoria. He moved to Sydney as his wife is a Sydney sider. That probably seals the deal, but also it might be one of those opportunities that's too good to refuse. So we'll see. I will note that at the same time that Mrs. No Balls disappears, our other wonderfully named Bussy Sniffer joins the chat for the first time for the night. It's either his wife or the cats. I hope he makes the right choice. Dear. Well, if the Crows or the Power play a prelim final, they can move to Norwood and Alberton due to the start of the Sheffield Shield. What goes around comes around. Oh, Lucas. I know. But you know that's never going to happen. Jackie says, I genuinely hate AFL initiatives. This doesn't seem bad. I think there's lots of pros, and it gives the AFL, the fan base, the opportunity for things like international rules, for Indigenous All-Stars, for State of Origin. Like all of these things can come back into play. The football is relevant for longer. And for those of you who aren't into cricket, now I love cricket. Lucas loves cricket. There's plenty of people in this chat that do love cricket, but I also know there's a lot of people who don't. And if you've got the season plotted where it is, there's obviously the perk for players in terms of their preparation and getting themselves ready and I guess where their breaks slide in amongst all of this. But season ends, you're into draft mode, you're into trade period, draft mode, those sort of things. It keeps football relevant really pretty much from the moment it begins in March or whenever this new starting point would be, almost all the way through to early to mid-December. And the AFL would absolutely love that. The other thing that, though, hasn't been discussed in this, that Eddie didn't talk about, and I presume it is unfortunately because I think it's ridiculous, but it's still being treated like an afterthought, is the women's game. I'm really interested to see where the women's game fits amongst all of this planning, because at the moment they've been trying to separate them. They've been trying to minimize the overlap. If they continue with the same model they've used in the last few years, where the women's game has started in a similar-ish sort of window to the pre-finals bye, they've kind of used that as a jumping off point. The girls aren't going to be done till Christmas, maybe over till after Christmas, and I just don't know if that works super well as well. So there's, I think, if they go with this, and I do like the idea, but if they go with this, I think they then need to turn around to the women's game and really rethink the way that they've been plotting that out in such a way that it gives the girls more spotlight than they've had before and doesn't shunt them into that sort of horrible limbo December, January sort of window. That sucks, I think. I don't love it at all. So those are all the topics for our news section for the night. Let's get into some Q&A. 2023 grand final was over 30 degrees, so October could be hot. It could be really hot. You're probably what you're getting back by starting later, you probably lose a little bit by shifting into October. But I mean, it's still for the most part that springtime weather. We're not getting scorches at that point. Whereas I feel like you're more likely to get a late scorcher, that March sort of crazy hot day that comes out of nowhere, than you are a really stinking hot one in September or even October. They might start to creep in November, late November, December, of course. But anyway, that's my gut feel. But that's all anecdotal, and different parts of Victoria and then Australia will say different things and have different experiences. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. All right, questions. Throw them at me, people. The chat has been very active tonight. It's been great to hear from all of you. Let's jump into some Q&A. We've got a whole range of different things that we'll discuss. Of course, if you haven't already done it, consider becoming a patron. I'll use this opportunity while I'm waiting for some comments to come in to promote our Patreon, which since I promoted it the other day, we've also added more patrons to the team. Thank you to the 35 of you who are contributing to our ongoing growth and all of our big plans for 2025 and beyond. We love you. We hope that what we're providing for you is a service that you really appreciate, from the early access content to the extended content and exclusive content as well, all found on our YouTube channel. I'm about to go on holidays. I've got big plans for some content that I want to make. And of course, that's going to give me more opportunities to do some scratching post content. I want to engage with the Patreon crew to put some posts out there, ask you what topics you want me to discuss so that I can do that in some of these dedicated videos. So stay tuned for a lot of that. And if you're not a patron, it's a good time to jump on the bandwagon. Beyond that, of course, we've got the super chat function. Don't hesitate to use that. I'm not sure if we've actually set a goal for tonight. Ben might, if he's watching, might set one, but we did have a goal a couple of nights ago for the Paul James Show, and that was that if we got the super chat, we were going to, I'm just trying to find the stream here. We were going to, hang on, we've got a goal here. Oh, Ben has set a goal in like the last minute. We get the one super chat, and I will make a Zach Butters to Geelong video. So if anyone kicks in the $2 or more for a super chat tonight, I will do a video. Ben has promised that I will do a video about Zach Butters coming to Geelong. So stay tuned for that one. But the goal the other night was that I would take over post-game live, kick Ben's stupid ass out of it. And that's exactly what's going to happen on Friday night. Get ready on Friday night because after the game, I'll be hosting post-game live where we'll talk all about the outcome from Geelong and Melbourne at GMHBA Stadium. Thank you in advance to everyone for joining me on that show. It'll be awesome to chat with you in the comments section and, of course, to host a whole bunch of you on the show. Where are we? And please utilize that live chat. Oh, Amy on cue has another point about Butters. Last thing on Butters, he was a massive Bulldogs fan growing up, so much so that just sitting next to Bont on All Australia night was a highlight for him. Not sure we would beat out the Dogs, sadly. Look, I think you're right. But for anyone who plays interstate, maybe the Adelaide and Western Australian teams are a bit different here because they've got their own contained little bubbles where they're just rock stars in that. But I feel like if you're coming from an interstate team back to Victoria, but you enjoyed the lifestyle that you had, going to Geelong is probably the closest to recapturing that. That would be my guess. So there's always that little thing, the culture, the environment, that does play some sort of part in it. I would agree. Look, I think we are far from a prime candidate here, but I'll have to get thinking about it because if someone drops a super chat through YouTube, if someone drops a super chat on the show tonight, then I'll be doing a Zach Butters to Geelong video. Ben has promised that I will do that. So thanks, Ben. He cracks the whip. He makes me work and work. You should see all the scars on my back from those the whips that are hitting my back. And no, nothing as sus as you might think when I talk about whips. How about it, chat? We've got lots that we can discuss, from Geelong news to AFL news, Zach Butters, Ben being a slave driver, and more. Otherwise, while we're waiting for some of those comments, we might throw over to my video game of the week segment where I indulge my other great passion of video games, because tonight is going to be real big. We'll see. I'll give it another minute. We'll see if some other comments pop up. Otherwise, we will toss across to something I've prepared earlier. Let me make sure it's... Would love to have him. We definitely need him. I mean, Zach Butters would be enormous in the midfield. What he would contribute would be absolutely huge. You need I need a Hoops Crew union. Yeah, so I can get Ben off my back. He's a piece of shit. What did I say before? He's got a horrible ego on him. He's a smug prick. Now he's cracking the whip and leaving scars on my back because he's a horrific boss. Hey, Ben. if you want to start making up bullshit stories about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pajamas, well, I'll start making up stories about you. Two can play that game. All right, let's take the opportunity here to get into our Game of the Week segment. While there's a bit of a lull in the comments section right now, tonight at midnight, there is a stream being hosted by Nintendo. So many of you have, there's a few of you got kids. There's also plenty of you out there that I've seen from the comments over the journey who are really into their video games, and Nintendo is tonight revealing everything we need to know about the Nintendo Switch 2, the brand new console that'll be coming out this year. We'll get a release date. I presume we'll get a whole bunch of other things. We're going to see a lot of games. Mario Kart is going to be chief among those. And I'm going to show off the first look trailer that they revealed a couple of months ago now. Like this is a little bit old, but I'm here to spruik and to try and sell some units. And I promise that despite the fact that I've been talking to Nintendo PR today, they didn't ask me to do this. I'm Nintendo fever right now. So bear with me. We're going to get our audio up and running, and we are going to take a look at the Nintendo Switch 2. So that is the Nintendo Switch 2. We are going to be learning a whole lot about it tonight. I'm already booked in with Nintendo to go hands-on with the thing before its launch. This is not the public thing that some people have had the opportunity to register for. That's only held in Melbourne. Melbourne, the only city in Australia where people will be able to try it out. I've got my own little media session. I'm really excited to check out what they've got in store there. But I think this console is going to be huge. For a little bit of context for anyone who's, I guess, not much of a gamer and doesn't necessarily understand why there might be so much hype around this thing, I want to just tell you, and I'm bringing up some data here for it. The Nintendo Switch, the original Nintendo Switch that came out now in 2017, Nintendo's most recent console, has sold nearly 151 million consoles. That's a mind-boggling number. I don't even want to think about the amount of money that is too. It just prints money. Nintendo's obviously been like one of the oldest hands in the business. They've been doing this thing for years, but they've had their ups and downs. The Nintendo Switch is absolutely the biggest console they have ever had. They are close to surpassing the sales of their own Nintendo DS platform, and are rapidly closing in on the final figures that the PlayStation 2 reached. Like they are so close to basically being like having the biggest console in the world, and they're about to launch its successor. This thing is going to be absolutely huge. And tonight at midnight, there's an hour-long presentation where they're going to be showing off the console, presumably the price, the release date, a bunch of games. We obviously saw a little tease for Mario Kart. Everyone, no matter how much you love games, has surely played a Mario Kart over the years and probably loved it. There's a new Mario Kart on the way. There's going to be a whole bunch more that will be discussed. I am super, super excited. And then it was revealed this morning, there's going to be a bunch of streams over the next few days. It's about 7 hours of stuff over the next couple of days where they're going to be showing off the games in depth. There's going to be interviews talking about the platform as well. I'm crazy hyped for this thing. And I'm a PlayStation guy first and foremost these days. Born and bred on Nintendo, though, and that nostalgia will continue to carry me through. Mario and Zelda always put a smile on my face. All right. Lucas has jumped in there. Just started playing Far Cry Primal. Old, but really impressed by it. Far Cry Primal is really, really cool. It's a nice change of pace. What you might notice, Lucas, if you haven't already, is that it is straight up the Far Cry 4 map. They just reskinned it. If you Google just Far Cry 4 map and Far Cry Primal map, you'll realize that the topology is exactly the same. They've just reskinned it. But the game itself, really, really cool. I like what they did with it. Nice change of pace. All right. Do we have any other questions? Football related, video game related, or other? For some reason, I'm on an almighty Oasis kick music-wise today. Not for some reason. My dog's just tearing along the fence line. That was Barkley. We've got our school's a bit of a workplace at the moment. They're building a whole new trade center off to the side of it for a lot of our tech classes. That was right next to my classroom today. The tradies out there had Triple M on. Morning Glory was being played, and I have just gone straight down the well. I've been listening to that album all day. Absolutely hook, line, and sinker. What's the story? Morning Glory has completely consumed my day. Any other thoughts though? I'm happy to discuss anything. If you want to talk TV shows, I've been watching Adolescence, the Netflix series. I think there's some extraordinary things that they've been doing with that. There is some real art to the way they are assembling that. It is the one-shot camera technique, where there's no cuts. I mean, there's some very strategic stuff that I think they've done, but it's not visible to the eye. They've done an incredible job of hiding that one, but. Jackie in the comments, saw Noel at Coachella years ago. That would be awesome. I haven't seen Oasis live, and I would really like to rectify that. I did not know, actually. Did you know that Microsoft's Prime games, Forza and Starfield, will be on PS5? I do. So Forza Horizon 5 arrives on April 29th. Indiana Jones, which was an exclusive as well, that comes out on, I think it's the 17th of April. Starfield hasn't been confirmed, but stay tuned. And a whole lot more. Yeah, like at the beginning of last year, there was basically this. There was some leaks getting out about a whole bunch of Xbox games that were going to be going multi-platform to hit Nintendo, to hit PlayStation. The noise was getting unbearable. So Xbox or Microsoft decided to host a podcast where they sat down and explained their strategy. They did a mostly pretty good job of explaining it. But that was when we had Sea of Thieves, Grounded, Pentiment, and Hi-Fi Rush. Much smaller games. Like they're great games, but they're like your B or C tier. But by launching Forza, by bringing Starfield, Doom the Dark Ages comes out in May. All of these things that are owned by Microsoft or Bethesda, but Bethesda's owned by Microsoft these days, they're all coming to PlayStation. There is pretty much no reason to own an Xbox anymore. if you're a parent out there and you're thinking about what console to buy your children for birthdays, or grandchildren for birthdays, or Christmas, or anything, Xbox makes great games, but there is no reason to own an Xbox anymore. They've more or less given up. And things like Game Pass, that'll be available on PlayStation in due course, I'm sure. I don't have any inside word on that one, but I feel like that is only a matter of time. Superman and Lanterns has got me hyped. I am not aware of a Superman and Lanterns thing, so feel free to fire a link over. I might check something out after the show is done. But yeah, that's awesome to hear. But is Mitch the is Mitch Hardy the Superman in this role? Like, is it just like some sort of pin-up thing that you've done? Like you've just stuck his head on Superman? Good to see you back though, Brendan. I thought we'd lost you before for the rest of the show. Any other questions, comments, concerns, video games, sport, whatever it happens to be? For me, it's a big night ahead. What time is it now? It's going on 9 o'clock. Oh, Lucas, it's never happening. It's absolutely never happening. I think the only way that you can play Nintendo games on the same platform as PlayStation games in the future is when both Nintendo and PlayStation eventually, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but eventually we get to a point where it is just like a streaming only future. That probably brings Xbox into the mix a little bit because you no longer need a box under the TV or anything like that, or a computer. As soon as you're able to stream everything 100%, and Xbox already does this, by the way. You can, like on a Samsung TV, a brand new Samsung TV, you can just connect a control via Bluetooth and stream the games to your TV, which is awesome. But as soon as those two embrace it, that's about the only way that you're going to see. Nintendo and PlayStation still kind of hate each other, and that goes back to the 90s. So yeah. Jackie just saw a post from Phoenix Foster. He's back out on the footy field. So good to see. It is. We've messaged, Phoenix and I message every now and then, back and forth. Him knowing my teacher background, and like we chatted quite a bit through the challenges he was having in the last few years. Mate, there's like a mini console if you want. You can go buy it. It costs you like $100. Yeah, we've chatted a little bit over the last few years. He continues, Phoenix, if you're watching, he continues to call me sir in any response. Knowing my teacher background, he kind of refers to me as sir, which he knows annoys me, but he continues to do it anyway. But I'm so glad to see that he's in a better place, that he's happy, he's among friends and family and enjoying football again. Like I'm stoked for him. I love the guy. Jackie's an Atari person. Atari's kind of low-key becoming a bit relevant again, not so much in terms of consoles, but in terms of games themselves. They're re-injecting themselves into the mix. It's been really good to see. All right. I'll give it another minute, and then we might wrap things up because I have an appointment with my television to watch the finale of Adolescence tonight, and then I'm back at it at midnight for this Nintendo Switch 2 thing. So it's a big night for me. And I've got to roll into parent-teacher interviews tomorrow night, then get home, record stuff about the Switch 2. Then we've got post-game live on Friday night. So there's a lot going on. Brandon's calling it. Casey, you're going to play Mitch Hardy this week. Revenge game. You'll get 40 disposals, kick 15 goals, and no one will select him. No one will pick him up in a mid-season draft or anything because that's his luck. While I'm pending any final comments coming through, thank you everyone for having tuned in tonight. It has been an absolute pleasure as always. I've seen more than 100 of you in that are live watching it tonight across Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. It's been an absolute pleasure to have all of you on board. Very much looking forward to doing so again on Friday night for post-game live. Lucas asks, are you a racing game fan? Not really. I don't mind them from time to time. Mario Kart is obviously an exception, but I think that's a bit different to what you're really specifically talking about. Your Gran Turismos, your Forzas, your Forza Horizons, those sorts of things. Not really. But Gran Turismo is kind of the front runner in terms of simulation. Forza is kind of the leader when it comes to arcade. Forza Horizon, the leader when it comes to arcade racing at the moment. And now you're going to be able to play them all on a PlayStation. It's a good thing if you're a PlayStation fan. I absolutely think Hardy will nominate for the mid-season draft. It'll be interesting to see if he gets picked up. I think he's like a really smart choice for a lot of clubs because he will address needs in midfield. And if there's been injuries, he can kind of plug some of those gaps. If he can just continue to do what he did last year for the Cats in the VFL, Geelong won't pick him up, but I'm sure someone else will. So that'll be a good thing to see if that's the case. All right, let's talk about the week or the next week or so of content. We've mentioned this already. Friday night, I've kicked Ben out of the hosting chair thanks to you and your super chats. And again, keep in mind, if someone drops a super chat now before the end of the show, I will be putting together a video where I'm discussing Zach Butters coming to the Cats. Ben has forced me into this one if the super chat goes through. So if that's something you want, that's something I'll deliver if a super chat comes through before we wrap the show up. Friday night, though, post-game live, I'm hosting it. Don't forget there is a large pizza giveaway from Shannon Pizza on offer. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you're the best commenter, contributor if you jump into the stream. That will be an awesome episode. I have every intention, and I know the game, we're going to look to start at probably 10:30 or thereabouts once the game is over. If people are in for the ride, we will go for hours. I know Ben is good for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Sometimes it extends a little bit beyond that. Let's push 3+. If you guys are there and keen to chat, let's push past 3 hours. I'm sure we can make it work. There'll be lots to discuss, especially if it's a big win. So that's Friday night. Expect Saturday for me to then do a review, like a reaction piece of content based on the game. You can check that out on Saturday morning. Sunday night, the Paul James Show returns, where I'll again be reviewing the game. You will all be so fed up with me talking about Melbourne and Geelong between post-game live, my reaction, and the Paul James Show, but we'll have enough of the week and all the other segments as well. Monday night, Ben returns with the tipping point. Tuesday, This is all those gambling winnings that you're spending, right? There we go. I guess I'm doing a Zach Butters video. It's on. It's happening. Tuesday night, the chaps chat Cats as they do and do an amazing job of it. Don't forget that the Twos, Jake's VFL-based show, has gone back behind the Patreon paywall. And that is simply because that's where it's always been. We kind of put it out there so that people can kind of see what it's about, get a bit of a taste for what it is. But ultimately, that is a product for the most dedicated of our audience who've been and most supportive and been able to support. And that's an important thing. We're not asking or forcing anyone to do it, but it's there as an incentive. $5 or $6 a month is what gets you access to all the stuff that we have on Patreon. That includes the Twos Wednesday nights when you can expect that. Lucas owns Paul. Yeah, I'm doing Zach Butters. I'm doing a Zach Butters video now. It's on. Lucas likes that. All right. Oh, so Lucas, you make sure you're coming off the long run up. We'll talk about everything. We'll talk about the Sheffield Shield. We'll talk about the game. We'll talk I'm ready for you on Friday night, mate. Make sure you're there and ready for me. It's from the Shield winnings. Last one. I love Nintendo. I have a Switch, but I wish they would release old school Pokemon games like Crystal, Yellow, etc. Yeah, they're pretty reluctant to do it, I think, for the most part. I think they kind of want to like Disney Vault these things. Not to mention the fact that the Pokemon company is a separate entity. That's why you get the anime. That's why you get the trading cards. And none of these things are actually Nintendo things. Nintendo has the games. But the Pokemon company is the entity above all that kind of makes a lot of these decisions. So it's a weird, messy one. And no one really understands Nintendo at the best of times, let alone when you factor in the Pokemon company, who's arguably even more confusing. But expect a bunch of details on this new Pokemon game tonight as well. All right, that is where we wrap things up. Thank you again, Lucas, for that super chat. We'll get a Zach Butters video out within the week. I might even do it with some of the time I have with the holidays. So I expect to see that early in the week next week once we get our regular scheduled programming out of the way, from post-game live to my match reaction to the Paul James show, tipping, all that sort of stuff. We'll manage to slot Zach Butters in there along the way. Thank you to everyone for having tuned in tonight. As always, I very greatly appreciate it. If you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like this video, tell your family and friends, share it, get our content out there. We want more hardcore Geelong fans in our chat, sharing their thoughts about every single game. It's awesome to have you all. It's been amazing tonight. I look forward to doing more of that in the future. If you're watching this video after the fact, you can jump in live When we host it, don't hesitate to jump in, put your thoughts in there. But if you're watching after the fact, continue to use that comment section. We will respond to as many comments as we can. There's a lot that come through, but we endeavor to respond to every single comment that comes through, and especially the more considered and responsible ones. None of those Hawthorn nuffies that get in there and have too much shit that they're throwing around. Don't forget to use the super chat function as Lucas did tonight. Follow us on social media. You can find me at Paul James Games across Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram. The Hoops Crew can be found at the Hoops Crew. Thank you to our sponsor, Cyril Cook Florist, as always, for your ongoing support. And I mentioned the Patreon before. $5 to $6 a month gets you an awesome suite of content, from early access content, exclusive content, and extended stuff from the chaps. Thank you, everyone, once again for having tuned in tonight. Post-game live with Coach Lucas and Paul on Friday. Stay tuned for that and more. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Remain Geelong strong, and I'll see you later.